that sort of comes into the next point where I want to talk a bit about technology. And now your CGM's gone off a couple times throughout this episode, as I'm sure, 2 times in the space of an hour and a half, but across the day, it's probably gone off, 10, 15 times. Now, we know that technology, as we said, is an amazing thing, but it also has its downsides with type 1 diabetes, doesn't it?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this, but I think it's something that we need to dive into a little bit more. So the CGM is an amazing piece of technology. It basically saves me from essentially potentially dying in my sleep, which is not something that's that uncommon. Like people with type 1 do die in their sleep. And that's because their blood glucose can crash so low that they lose consciousness, you can have a seizure, coma, death. It's a real fear. The CGM gives you these alerts and alarms before you get to that dangerous territories, right? So you can set these alarms. It tells you which direction you're trending. You're trending down at what rate you can expect to have a low in X minutes, right? So mine's telling me now, I set mine at, I want to know when I'm approaching 4 millimoles, because when I'm in the 3s, low 3s or 2s, it's not good. So it allows you to catch these lows early. Now, the problem is you can become obsessed with not just monitoring your blood glucose, but and this is happening outside of the diabetes world, people are tweaking their lifestyle to try produce good numbers on their CGM. So because they think that it's going to improve their health outcomes long term. There's no evidence for that, right? So I guess my point is we've got to use this technology wisely. And at this stage, I think this technology is best suited for those who it was designed for, which is people with type 1 diabetes and some people with type 2 diabetes. If you don't have diabetes, you don't need to be wearing a CGM. If you think it's going to add years to your life and it's going to improve and help you as a fat loss tool, and it's just not true. So you don't have to fall for the nonsense. There's just no evidence for a CGM in people without diabetes as a fat loss tool or a longevity tool or any of those kinds of things. So yeah, we've got to be very careful with how we use the technology.
So interesting. Contributes to diabetes burnout, which is definitely real, a form of anxiety and a lot of mental health illnesses provoked by diabetes diagnosis. Some of the technology, just to give a rundown for any listeners that might be interested, and keeping it as simple as possible, but we obviously have the CGM, which is continuous glucose monitor, which is what you're using at the moment, likely Freestyle Libre.
This is like the Dexcom, yeah.
Dexcom. But essentially, a CGM, it actually measures the glucose in the interstitial fluid. So it doesn't actually measure the glucose in the blood. So what you're saying there about when you're approaching 4 is the CGM actually gives an indication of the trends in the glucose levels. So there's I think it's about a 10 to 15 minute delay time in terms of the reading on the CGM and when it will actually be that equivalent reading in the blood, like glucose in the blood. So it gives you time to act on that. And what you would probably do in most scenarios when you are that low is you would just determine that you're that low by doing a finger prick reading to just determine the glucose in the blood.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's measuring interstitial fluid, but it's calibrated so that it should be timed with the blood in real time, right? So it's not like there's a 15-minute delay where my blood is 3 and my thing's telling me that I'm at 5. It actually is calibrated so that it should be in real time. But yes, a finger prick is the best way to just confirm that number, because there's also error. There's going to be a little bit of error depending on how the sensor was put in, how long it's been in for. So yeah, doing a blood finger prick test will help you to know exactly sort of where you're at. But even with a finger prick, there is still a degree of error. So again, these are just tools that we use. These technologies are tools that we use to give us clues and guide us as best as possible. You're never going to know for sure what your blood glucose is at any given time, but what's most important are these trends and patterns over time, right? So you don't have to be so hyper-focused on the number, because your 5.5 on your CGM might actually be a 4.8 in your blood right now. Like there's a slight error there. So, but the burnout side of diabetes, I personally haven't experienced, thankfully. But I know a lot of people who have, and man, my heart goes out for them, because the idea of being assigned this full-time job that you never signed up for and you can't quit at any time it's hard. Like you have to manage this 24/7. There's hundreds of decisions you have to make on a daily basis. And if you're burnt out and demotivated and the consequences are dire, it's a tough place to be in. So anyone who's experienced burnout, yeah, I definitely feel for you. And I think that, I mean, I don't know the best ways around the burnout, but a lot of it is psychological and the mental side, right? Like most people know what to do in terms of how to live a healthy life. Most people know what to do and what not to do. Don't smoke, don't drink too much alcohol, exercise, diet, all this stuff. The what is not what's the thing that's lacking. It's the actual actioning of it. It's the bridging the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And I think that that's the part of diabetes burnout. It's like, I know I should manage my blood glucose. I know that if I'm high for too long, it's going to be bad long term, but I just don't care anymore. I'm fed up. I'm sick and tired. And that's a reality for a lot of people. Scary place to be. And I think that there are ways out of it. And I think it takes a lot of mental fortitude. You've really got to sort of dig deep and find reasons why. That's the most important thing. Reasons why you want to take control of your diabetes again, and look for that joy in the future. That's the thing. If it's about fear, like we said, is a pretty shitty motivator long term. Short term, yeah, it scares you for a minute or two or a day, but it's the long term joy. I want to the next 20 years so that I can see my as a family, parent, whatever. That's what's important.
Yeah, and
We cut.
I often see that in like school settings where you have teachers who are often hooked up to CGMs, parents are hooked up to the CGM. They can kind of see what readings you're having throughout the day. So, in childhood and often going through school, you can kind of be a little bit sheltered. I think that burnout, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, generally you see that in that transitional period after school or university, when it's just you out there in the world on your own, having to manage yourself.
Yes, bang on, exactly right. So your support network is so important. Like as a kid, especially with this technology, you can have your guardian not just measuring your blood glucose, but administering your insulin remotely. Now that there's these devices, you've got the Omnipod pumps. Yeah. It's unbelievable. So like you don't even have to be, driving the car, so to speak. You can be a passenger and somebody else is doing all that for you. But then once you become, adolescent, young adult, it's all you. No, there's nobody there holding your hand. There's nobody there administering your dose, figuring this out. Like it's you. You have to take control. You have to be responsible for every action that you make. And yeah, I mean, if you're not trained, like if you get it as a young kid and you're guided and they held your hand all the way through, when you're sort of, so to speak, set free and it's now you on your own, it can be very hard. So for me, part of the blessing of getting diagnosed at the age of 22 was that I had to take control from day one. It was my responsibility. No one was going to help me. But if I was a toddler, it might be a different story. So yeah, it's very hard.
I guess the thing is that with the pump, it's almost like simulating an artificial pancreas to some extent. So in like a closed loop system of insulin delivery, and essentially the CGM or the glucose monitor will talk to the pump, insulin pump. And in that sense, as I said, it serves as like your pancreas, but it sits on the outside of your body. Have you used a pump for exercise or anything, or do you just administer?
Mate, I haven't used a pump. The reason why I don't use a pump is because I don't want to be attached to any more devices. The CGM was enough of a leap for me. It's a psychological thing for me. I don't want to have to wear my disease. I don't want to be reminded of it physically, having it attached to my belt or in my pocket. I want to be completely free and feel like, just like I was before my diagnosis. But I know that a pump is really amazing. Like a lot of people love their pumps. They manage their blood glucose brilliantly with it. It actually is the opposite for them. It takes away the psychological burnout compared to using multiple daily injections. So it's a personal preference thing. And plus my control is really good on multiple daily injections. So I don't see a need. But let's say for whatever reason, my control was terrible and I knew that a pump was an option that would, really improve my quality of life and especially long term, I would consider it. But at this stage, I'm very happy just doing the injections.